Hey friends, welcome to episode 10 of our science fiction book read along. Tonight we are reading chapter 22 of the book The Terraformers by Annalee Newitz. Each time we're skipping ahead about 4 chapters, so next time we will be picking up with chapter 26. As always, please leave your comments, thoughts, points for discussion in the comments to the video, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this reading. All right, so with no further ado, chapter 22. 2 months with Homo sapiens. We cede to the Archaea and other people of Spider City and their descendants all the lands, liberties, and properties associated with Spider Mountain which are not sold to or possessed by Verdants or any other private entity. We also leave to the aforementioned subjects the privileges of farming and water access to the Eel River that they formerly possessed, and they in turn agree to provide 2 months of labor to Verdants each year as long as this treaty shall hold. If any controversies or conflicts happen to arise between Spider City and Verdants at any time for any real or supposed wrong or injury done on either side, no private revenge shall be taken, and the rivers shall not be activated. Instead, proper application shall be made to the executives of Verdants and the Spider City Council for remedy or redress. Violation of any of these terms voids the treaty. Excerpted from the Eel River Treaty, ratified 59,007 at L'Orange and Spider City, Saskia, by representatives of Verdants and Spider City. Ask anyone from Spider City about the Eel River Treaty, and they'd tell you that it was justice for 10 months of the year. But as for those other 2 months, everyone had a different opinion. Rotting pile of entrails, sure. A way to know your enemy, that too. Some people called it treaty servitude. Others said it was a chance for cultural exchange and diplomacy, but nobody ever said they enjoyed giving 2 months of free labor to Homo sapiens who worked for Verdants. Sulfur checked the position of the sun overhead, shucked off their boots, and dipped a foot into the surf. Their shoulder-length brown hair was held back with twine, revealing wide-set green eyes and a broad face. The silver hoop of a breather clipped to their septum looked more like jewelry than vital technology for survival. From a distance, they could have passed as a Homo sapien. But close, their arms were just a little too long and the rib cage too large beneath a plain blue sunblock jumpsuit. The Archaean reached into one of the pouches on their belts and retrieved a piece of flatbread folded around sour berries and a smear of almond butter. It was the last of the food they had brought from home, and it tasted like contentment. The ocean was clear and calm at this latitude, especially here on the Bay of Comfort, and in the distance they could see the furry green peaks of the Bronze Islands. Spider City was thousands of clicks southwest, and Sulfur's team back at the ERT Civil Engineering Lab was probably breaking for lunch right about now. I'm getting a signal from the L'Orange team. Rocket tapped their smooth oval head in the spot where ears would be on a hominin, and went back to watching the waves with Sulfur. They'll be here in an hour. About time, let's get our treaty servitude over with. The robot shrugged. It's not indenture, we made a treaty. If it's so great, why did you defect to Spider instead of going back to L'Orange with all the other Homo sapiens? Rocket emitted a few bars of farty, comical music and put an arm around Sulfur's shoulders. They'd had variations on this conversation many times during their centuries of working together. Spider has better perks. I mean, look at this upgrade I got. The bot gestured at their almost featureless bipedal body, a 2-meter-tall Archaean skinned with anodized titanium that shimmered with bands of purple and blue. Usually the two rangers ended their banter with Rocket showing off their slapstick sexy dance moves and Sulfur whistling in appreciation. This time, though, the bot was unusually somber. I'd be dead by now if I'd gone back to L'Orange. Nobody gets ported to a new body there, especially people like me. Mounts, I mean, technically my INAS rating made me a person, but they saw me as a glorified sky scooter. I can't believe they still use the INAS system. Every time I hear somebody say intelligent assessment rating, like it means something, I want to slap them. I know the feeling, but when you grow up with it, well, it's hard to see that it's just a stinking wormball of lies feeding on a cesspit full of carcinogenic bacteria. Wow, you're in your feelings, my friend. Sulfur's tone was lighthearted, but they put an arm around Rocket's waist and gave a squeeze of reassurance. Somebody from my past is joining us in the field. Sulfur was surprised. Rocket rarely talked about the people they'd known in their previous life, and Sulfur didn't pry. Now that the bot had raised the issue, though, they couldn't contain their curiosity. Are they coming today? Who are they? He, actually. His name is Misha, and he was a student of my old friend Destry. They've been working together on and off for the past 7 centuries, and after she died last year, we stayed in touch. He's a network analyst like Destry, but he's built to a slightly different template. He's here to help us figure out the public transit problem. Sulfur had heard a lot about Destry, of course. Everyone in Spider City knew the L'Orange Ranger who had helped broker the treaty. Not everyone thought she was a hero for that, but they definitely remembered her. Rocket had mentioned before that they were friends, but didn't embellish. Sulfur's path had never gone as far north as L'Orange in the boreal forest that Destry studied, so they'd never met in person. Still, Sulfur thought they knew the broad outlines of Destry's life, not simply from histories, but from working in the ERT, seeing her reports and data analyses. They'd even talked a few times at meetings. A student, though. Sulfur hadn't heard anything about him. That was intriguing. It was also good news. They desperately needed a network analyst on the ground if they were going to connect all of Masqua's cities. Whatever transit system they chose during this mission would be moving millions of people between an unpredictable number of places, including the settlements planned for those 5 islands in the misty distance, whose residents would want to reach the mainland regularly. Tilting their heads, Sulfur squinted at the water and imagined a graceful bridge joining the spit of land to the mountains of the nearest island. Or perhaps they could use barges. Hopefully, Destry's student Misha would actually have some experience working on mobility. Presently, they heard a rustle in the palm trees behind them, and a Homo sapiens emerged onto the beach alongside, a black and white cow with a torso made from gleaming metal. Misha, Zest, it's so good to see you. Rocket strode quickly to the new arrivals, bending down slightly to embrace Zest. Sulfur followed behind, curious and suddenly nervous too. Though they'd worked with decent people from L'Orange and knew some Homo sapiens defectors in Spider City, they couldn't suppress a flare of immediate distrust when they took in his slight frame and short arms. Misha had curly blue-black hair that made a chaotic fringe around his thin face, medium brown skin, and the small childlike features of a typical Homo sapien. When they got closer, Sulfur noticed that his irises were deep black like some Archaeans. It gave him an uncanny air, a friend in the mask of an intruder. Misha returned Rocket's hug with a smile, but he did not introduce himself to Sulfur, nor did he introduce his partner, the cow named Zest. Instead, he looked over their shoulder to the distant bronze islands, now attracting wads of afternoon clouds. So I guess we have to figure out whether we want boats or bridges, eh? He shot a glance at Sulfur, then looked away again without smiling. Immediately, Sulfur was annoyed. That was exactly what they had been thinking, but when Misha talked, it sounded like he was taking ownership of the idea. Sulfur shrugged dismissively. I guess if all you want to do is follow what Verdant's put in their planning package. I suppose so, he replied. Sulfur couldn't tell if he was dismissing them or actually agreeing, and that was even more irritating. Zest twitched the hide on her neck, and a simplified map of Masqua suddenly hung in the air between the 4 of them, its coastal areas shaded red except in the far north where Arctic ice armored the land against settlement. Anything marked red was land that had already been sold, either to individuals or development companies. There were black dots for future cities, and yellow dots for ones that were already under construction. Sulfur had visited many of the new urban zones over the past century, troubleshooting water infrastructure and adjusting the ratio of build structures to parks and farms. One arm akimbo, they surveyed the map and found nothing new about it. What are we looking at, Zest? Before his partner could reply, Misha spoke. As you can see, there's a lot of ground to cover, and I'm afraid we're in a time crunch. Ronnie has asked us to use the next 2 months to finalize the public transit plan that will link our cities and start the process of production on vehicles. Zest flicked a black-tipped ear and continued. We also need to establish a model for dealing with city leadership to implement these plans. Sulfur and Rocket looked at each other in surprised dismay. This wasn't what either of them had expected. I thought we were doing field work, Rocket asked, their tone halfway between question and accusation, to assess the environmental impact of transit on the landscape. Misha stared at the ground. We have to do that too. Now Sulfur was truly pissed off. What? In 2 months, we're going to do an environmental impact report, a production plan for we don't even know what kinds of vehicles, and develop a way to interface with city leadership? Do you have a secret army of transit planners hidden in your ass? Zest made a noise that sounded like she was trying not to snort a laugh, and Misha flinched. We can work quickly, he muttered. I don't care how fast you are. There's no way to do all that unless you are going to dedicate more people to it. Rocket put a light hand on Sulfur's arm. It's us for now, but we're only getting started. The anodized metal of Rocket's head flared blue in the sunlight as they faced Misha. Isn't that right? We're going to make some recommendations, but deadline to break ground on transit is, 59,775? We've got a few decades to work out the details. That's not true. Misha's face pinched into an authoritative frown. Ronnie moved up the deadline because so many cities are occupied already, and Verdant is contractually obligated to provide intercity transit. Now that Dustry's gone, I'm the lead network analyst for special projects, and this is Ronnie's top priority, so we need to make it our priority too. Sulfur sighed quietly. So that's how it was going to be. This Homo sapien was going to tell them what to do, with the implicit threat that he'd tattle on them to his Verdant's bosses if they didn't fall in line. Sulfur was about to say something sarcastic when Zest cut in. Listen, I know this isn't what you were hoping for, and that you don't have a choice about being here with us, but we have a chance to make transit on Sasky truly sustainable. We can do something great, something that will have a lasting impact and bring people in the new cities together. That's what we all want, and I know we can do it. What do you say, Sulfur? Rocket looked at them encouragingly. Fine, Sulfur grumbled, but we need to start by gathering environmental impact data and do some serious field work in the cities. I don't want to wind up with some mobility plan that reeks like a carcass waiting for vultures. Verdance doesn't give a shit about quality as long as we meet the deadline. But at Spider City, we desperately need a transit system that will connect us to services and supplies on the rest of the continent. It's not just a line item in some real estate contract. We need it. Do you understand? They glared at Misha, whose downcast eyes were partly hidden by a curly lock of hair. When he finally looked up, the lines in his face were even deeper, as if Sulfur was an exhausting nuisance rather than a colleague worthy of respect. I understand. We should use Spider City as our test case for dealing with city leadership. You can take point on that. Sulfur didn't like his tone. I'm not going to be your shield if we get to Spider and this plan smells like shit. Was that a flicker of a smile at the edge of Misha's mouth or a grimace? Sulfur didn't care. He was about to find out how uncomfortable they could make him during this treaty servitude gig. Among Sulfur's many talents was an aptitude for disobedience, especially the subtle kind that drove meat corporate types into a frenzy. Rocket emitted an upbeat tune, trying to lighten the mood. Okay then, sounds like we have a plan to do some field work in the new cities, analyze it, and end our tour of duty at Spider. As the bot spoke, they also sent a text to everyone containing the same message. It was one way Spider City people formalized plans, so everyone had the same information in their heads for reference. Zest gave a nod and yanked a mouthful of grass from the place where the tree line met the sand. Misha made a pained face as he received the text, but he nodded too. Sulfur shrugged. Somehow this little Homo sapien man made even the simplest form of consensus seem like a terrible burden. He wouldn't last a day in Spider. Alright guys, that's it for Chapter 22. Join me next time for Chapter 26, and please leave your thoughts and comments in the comment section to the video. Thank you so much for joining me, and good night.